inevitably find that at some point in the past we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. So Bob's next topic is work and self-sacrifice for others. It is in the 12th step that working with others we begin to master this selfishness and self-centeredness. In the St. Francis prayer it reads, for it is by forgetting that one finds. And for myself, as Jane said as well, I take much less than I used to. I look for what I can bring to the situation, the table, my work, my family. May I bring happiness. May I bring forgiveness. May I bring love. And I'll open this up to Bob.
I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say. Bob Darrell, I'm an alcoholic. Hello, Bob. That is a very great part of the book. Very personally to me, it's a very important part of the book. So I came to my first meeting before I was old enough to take a legal drink, and I relapsed for over 6 years. And the end accumulation of all that failure was I tried to take my own life, and I get sober in 1978 in Las Vegas, unexpectedly. And I had a sponsor who was a fanatical 12-step guy and service guy, and he just put AA as the center of your life, and that's what he was about, and that's what he pushed me to be about. And I look back at this, and I think God did something through him, because he pushed me to do some things that he didn't really push all his sponsees to do. But I think he intuitively knew that I was the kind of alcoholic that was cut from the same cloth that Bill Wilson was cut from. I'm a depressive. My second sponsor, Clancy, was a depressive. That's why he did so much stuff in AA. And depressives have to get real involved. Depression can't hit a moving target. And he knew that intuitively, and he pushed me into 12-step work and service when I was brand new. I wasn't even out of a detox, but a couple days and he's already wanting me to go on 12-step calls. He wants me to be one of the guys that takes the meetings back into the detox. And, and I'd worked as a therapist at one time, and I had a lot of psychology, and I had been in a lot of therapy. So I said to him what came out of all of that, I said, well, I understand what you're talking about, but don't you think I should work on me for a while? And when I said that, he got to look like he bit into a lemon, and he went, work on you? You've done quite enough of that. Stop it. And he pulled me out of fixing myself and encouraged me and pushed me to go help others. And that's really the essence of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill Wilson, something happened, I think it was December 14th, 1934, the day before Bill got out of Towns Hospital. Something happened. And we all know the story about his spiritual awakening, and the wind from a high mountaintop blew through the room and the light got bright, all that stuff. But I don't think that's when something happened. I think there's a subtle little thing, a shift that changed the world that happened after that. And Bill says in his story, he was laying in his hospital bed, And now picture yourself in a detox. You don't feel very good in detox. Detox is not like it's not the high point of spirituality in your life. It's not a good deal. He's ruined everything in his life. His poor wife, who had been a debutante, was working her just this miserable little job just to keep food on the table and a roof over their head. He's been a failure at absolutely everything. There's not one area of Bill Wilson's life that is not problematic. And he's laying in the midst of that, in detox, sober just a couple days. Still shaken, I'm sure. And he's laying in his hospital bed, and he said, the thought came to me that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of alcoholics out there. Maybe I could help them. Now, I don't know about you, but a lot of thoughts came to me in detox. That was not one of them. I mean, that was not on my radar. And I think that's the moment when God stepped in. He was tired of seeing us die. And Bill Wilson came out of there with a conviction that if he helped other alcoholics, whatever this experience was, I don't think he ever really understood it completely. Silkworth said, whatever it is, hold on to it. And he came out of there with a conviction that if he could hold on to it by helping other drunks. And he did. And he threw himself into that with a fervor and an obsessiveness that only alcoholics are. We're extreme examples of, we can get real obsessed with stuff. And he got real obsessed with that. And they say he worked with 96 people in 5 months. And none of them stayed sober. Except he did, because he found the vehicle to relieve him of the bondage of self. And there's a prophecy that line that she read at the beginning kind of comes out of. It's almost a promise. It says that we discovered that if the alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through two things, and it's not prayer and meditation, which are important, but that's not how you perfect and enlarge your spiritual life. He says you do it through self-sacrifice, inconvenience. If your sponsor is asking you to do only things that are convenient, the highest coinage here is inconvenience. And if through self-sacrifice and constant work with others and their needs and helping others. He said if the alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through those actions, altruistic, other-centered, inconvenient actions, it says, promises, you will never survive the certain trials and low spots ahead, which means they're coming. It's like if there's promises, there's anti-promises. That's an anti-promise. You got some trials and low spots ahead. We all do. I don't know anybody that's sober, decades that hasn't had those. And in my personal experience, it's the 12-step work and the service that has allowed me to not only survive those things, but actually become better for it and more useful. So I get out of the detox, and my sponsor's pushing me into doing all this 12-step work, and it really is inconvenient. But I'm doing it. And then I was getting tired of it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, maybe you have the voice in your head that in the midst of all this AA service, the little voice that just starts. It starts not too loud, but gets louder in time. And it's just saying, yeah. But what about me? What about me? What about me? What about me? But You don't even have a life with all this AA stuff. What about me? And as that voice starting to grow inside of me, as it does in most of us, I suppose, that are selfish and self-centered by nature, I had this experience. I wasn't sober very long. I was maybe a year and a half, a little over a year, I believe. And I suffered intermittent depression in my first 4 years or so of 4 to 5 years of sobriety, because I hadn't really worked the steps out of the book, but I was keeping it at bay by going to 2-3 meetings a day, having hospital and institution commitments. I was a GSR. I mean, I was I was on 2 conference committees, young people and the regular conference, very active. So the actions of service in Alcoholics Anonymous were keeping my depressive, obsessively self-involved nature at bay, somewhat, but never completely. So all I'd have to do is just have a couple hours to sitting around with nothing going on, and I would start to implode into myself. I'm one of those kind of guys, I don't know any better in early sobriety. You give me some free time just to sit, and what I like to do? I like to ponder my life. I've never pondered it and then spiraled upward. I just ponder it and I see the negative, I just spiral down into the abyss, and the more I think about my future, oh my God, it's so problematic. And the more I think about my finances, I'll never be any better. I'm gonna probably be 90 years old eating Alpo in some old folks' home, and I just take it all the way down. And so I'm sitting in my apartment this one night, and I'd been to 2 meetings that day. And I started spiraling. As I pondered my life, I started spiraling down into the abyss of obsessive self-focus. And I get scared because I'm starting to get really depressed. And I had drank over depression in the 6 or so years that I was in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had some periods of abstinence, and I would drink often over depression. It's that feeling, you can't nail it. It's just that chronic dissatisfaction. What's wrong? I don't know. Everything, nothing, I don't know. It's horrible. And I'm in there and I'm sinking into this depression. And I said a little prayer. There was a meeting not too far from my apartment, up on the strip at a place called Duffy's. It used to be a bar, now it was a chapel, and they had a lot of AA meetings in there. And it was about probably 10 to 10 at night. And there was a meeting there that was at 10:15 to 11:15 called the Between the Shows group, and it was called that because in Vegas in those days, in the 70s, and even into the 80s, there was usually, most of the casino hotels had 2 shows. They had an early show, which was a dinner show, where you could actually dinner part of the show, and then they had a late cocktail show. And all the entertainers wanted meetings to go to, so they created this in between the shows group, and there'd be a lot of tourists there, a lot of band leaders with tuxedos and homeless people. It was like the Star Wars bar, man. It was amazing. It was a huge, crazy place. But I thought if I could get there, maybe I'd hear something, because I got help there. That was a good meeting. I thought maybe I'd hear something snap me out of this funk, and I went to the Duffy's meeting, and I didn't hear nothing really. Depression is one of the highest levels of self-centeredness. The only time in my whole life I think I was ever more self-absorbed and self-focused and self-involved than when I'm in a depression is when it was so bad that I was trying to take my own life. I mean, that's just all about me, right? And I'm in that spot, and I go to the meeting, and when I'm like that, it's hard to hear. God could be trying to talk to me through the people in the meeting, and it's like, wow, wow. It's like music in the doctor's office, because the big show's on the inside. And isn't that odd? When I get spiritually sick, there's a reversal in my reality. When I'm spiritually in a good place, I'm very present. I hear you, I see you, I'm right here. But when I get spiritually sick, you recede, and all I hear and see is me. And that's where I was at. And I was in this meeting, I can't hear nothing. But there's a guy sitting, I'm sitting sort of in the back row. There's a guy sitting across from me who's bad shape. He's grabbing himself and rocking back and forth, and he's evidently coming off a bad run. He gets up and he goes into the bathroom. You can hear him in there throwing up, and I'm trying to. I got a wealth of unresolved problems I'm trying to figure out, and this guy's annoying the crap out of me. But I don't, I just push that aside. By the end of the meeting, I'm actually worse. If you've ever been to a meeting and you're really depressed and it's full of happy people that are grateful for everything, it doesn't help. It's just, oh my God, you want to shoot them all. It's just bad. And so I ended up staying afterwards to help this guy, Charlie, as the secretary, with the trash and the chairs and everything for the chapel. Set it back up before we go home, and Charlie and I are leaving, the last two guys to leave the chapel, and he's locking up, and I look over, and the guy that was coming off the drunks lane in front of my car. Now, I'm going to have to step over him to go home and ponder my life more deeply, which is really what I want to do, except Charlie's there, and he has a big mouth, and he'll tell everybody in AA what a lousy member I am if I don't help the guy. And Charlie even said something. He said, "You going to help this guy?" I don't want to help him, but he knows my sponsor. I'll get dimed out. So I go over, and the guy's a mess. He's peed his pants, he stinks. He has no medical insurance. And back in that time, if you didn't have medical insurance, there was no place that would take you yet. Except sometimes you could get a guy into the county hospital under, I think it was called we used to use this, we never knew what it read, but there was something called the Hill-Burton Act that provided for funds for indigent patients to county-funded hospitals. And anyway, under that, you could sometimes get a guy in. So I took the guy in my car, and I'm driving up there, and I'm not happy about this, because I've been to this hospital before on 12-step calls. They treat you badly. They don't like alcoholics. They'll ignore you while you're sitting there and take people that come in after you, because they have this attitude. They'd rather treat these legitimately ill people than these self-inflicted people that are probably going to be back here in another month anyway, because that's their experience with us. We're hopeless people. So I got the guy in my car, and I know I'm going to be there all night. I got to go to work in the morning. I'm going to be tired. It's going to be bad. Oh, God. I don't like any of this. And I don't say nothing to the guy, but I'm angry. I'm depressed and angry. Now, anger's a little better than depression, but not much. And I'm getting aggravated, that I'm the only one doing this. How come, doesn't anybody else step up besides me? It's just, oh God. And we get him up there, and we sign in the emergency room, and I'm sitting there, and I'll tell you when this was. You could smoke cigarettes in hospitals. True story. And I'm giving him cigarettes, and we're talking, and he starts to tell me about his life and how he feels. And he told me that he doesn't know what happened to him, but he can't even drink away the feelings of shame and remorse and guilt that he had for the things he did to the people he cared about. He told me that for some time he was just wishing he had the courage to just kill himself and make it all stop. And then he said something that just really hooked me into him. And he said, you know, I don't know why you're wasting time with me. I'm not like you people in AA. I always drink again. And he's telling me that. He's telling that to a guy who had just tried to commit suicide a year or so before, who had been relapsing for 6 years, and alcohol stopped making the shame and the guilt go away. And what he's really doing is he's telling me about me. And somewhere in the wee hours of the morning, I had a feeling come over me. I understand what it is today. It's agape love. It's altruistic love. But I just remember sitting there, all of a sudden, I'm not depressed anymore, and he is very important to me. I want him to be okay, probably at that moment, more than I want me to be okay. And it was like I fell in love with him. For no apparent reason that would make sense to me. I mean, he can't get me a better job. He's probably not even going to stay sober a year and mention my name for credit or something. You know, he's like, this guy's he's a chronic relapser. But he was just like me, and I discovered later is what happened is I fell in love with the me that is in him. A part and an aspect of myself that I could never love directly. And I had a therapist one time who said, we got to learn to love yourself. And intellectually, it's kind of a novel idea. Oh, love yourself. She gave me instructions to stand in front of a mirror, and I had to say these positive affirmations as I looked at myself in the mirror, you know. God loves me, God forgives me, God accepts me, I love me, I forgive me. What a bunch of crap I accept. You know, I could have said that till the planet blew up, and it would not have changed the way I felt about myself. But in loving people who aren't even worthy of love, people the way I was when I got sober, and people reached out to me and helped me, I started to change the way I felt about myself. It changed me. And I there was a point where they finally, we'd been there for hours, a long time, and they finally got him a bed, and they were going to detox him. And I just say, I'll come back and see you and all this stuff. And I go and get in my car, and it's early in the morning. The sun's just starting to come up over Sunrise Mountain, and the sky has a pink blush across it. And I've seen a lot of sunrises in my life, but I never saw one like that. Maybe it was the first one I was ever really present for and not in my head. And I remember feeling like an unbelievable, it was the antithesis of depression. The antithesis of it. There was a rightness where everything was in divine order and perfect. My life was great. Everything's just, there's no lack here. I felt the presence of God in that car driving home. And it was an amazing experience. And it was as if the veil was lifted, and for the first time, I understood the brilliance of the old-timers who kept pushing me to do 12-step work because they knew something I didn't know. And I'd spent years in therapy dealing with depression. But they knew something I didn't know. They knew that if I continued to take altruistic, inconvenient, other-centered action, that one day you'd hear a loud as my head popped out of my butt, and I would actually show up in the realm of the spirit in God's world. And that I felt so connected that morning coming home. And that was the morning I claimed my primary purpose. I understood why they want me to do this. And I've never looked back, and it's been the bread and butter of my recovery ever since. hospital and institution meetings, 12-step work, sponsoring people, and with no self-management or discernment. In other words, if somebody comes up and says, would you sponsor me? I think to myself, oh, this is such a loser. Oh, I don't want to do this. I'm busy. You don't understand. I got stuff to do. But I say yes. And it doesn't matter what I think, it just matters what I do. And sometimes it's inconvenient. Sometimes I got stuff, I could, even if I don't have stuff I'd rather do, give me a second, I'll come up with something. And I say yes. And Alcoholics Anonymous is it's such an illogical deal, especially in the day and age we live in, where there's huge movements on how to fix yourself. And we don't do that in AA. We get fixed, but we don't do it. We busy ourselves helping others, and in our apparent absence from our own problems, when we've pushed them aside, we're forgetting ourselves, and I'm over here helping someone, it's like my life seems to straighten out. And things happen, and it rights itself. Dr. Paul was a good friend, and he died quite a few years ago. But he used to talk. It's one of the things he used to say that was so good. He said, "I'm amazed over the years how while I'm helping people, my problems die of neglect." And I've come to the conclusion that my problems never existed. They're the ramblings and the perception of an ego that has to scare and worry me with problems in order to control me. Those problems never occurred, and they never do. The only time that something I'm afraid of actually comes to fruition is when the fear drives me into management. And then you know what happens? It happens to all of us. We make the fear come true. We what's the book say? Our misery is of our own making. It arises out of myself, and it does. Psychiatrists, psychologists often call that self-fulfilling prophecies. It's like, I can give you 100 examples of it. Early sobriety, oh my God, I had one disaster after another. And if you sent a CSI team into the disaster, they're only going to find my DNA. Because I'm the guy who made the bad thing happen. I remember I was, I had this happened at a couple jobs. You ever worked somewhere and you just kind of because you're a bit clairvoyant, and you kind of know stuff. You know they don't really like you. Yeah, they're cold. They don't really like you. Distant. And it's a funny thing, if you go to work every day with a feeling and a secret thought that they don't like you, eventually they don't like you. It's a funny thing how that happens. You put yourself in a position of opposition, and you don't even know it. It's your body language. It's everything. It's how you show up. And I start to reap that. I was in a relationship, early sobriety. I don't have anything. I don't know why somebody's with me, right? I got nothing in here. I got nothing. I mean, I have negative self-esteem. And I'm with this girl, and she's kind of cute, and oh my God. But I get this fear. Oh my God, I get this fear she's going to dump me. She's going to go with somebody else. I know it. So you know what happens? The fear drives me. Drives me to be the guy that drives by her apartment in the middle of the night, peeking in the windows, make sure no guy's there. drives me to go through her purse looking for guys' cards, you know. I remember almost got in a fight with a guy in a meeting because he hugged her after the meeting. And I got, hey, you don't be hugging, you know, people thinking I'm nuts, right? And what happened? I made the fear come true. I literally, slowly and incrementally pushed her out of my life by management. I made the fear come true. So I start throwing myself. One of the first fruits of a lot of service in Alcoholics Anonymous, it deprives you of long periods where you can think. You're busy. And I got my first car, and I would have never. God took good care of me. I would have never been able to get a car. Never. I couldn't even imagine saving up enough money for a down payment. And there was a guy in AA whose dad died, and he had this old beat up Ford. And he said, "Hey, it runs." He said, "Here, just take it. Give me $200. Pay me $50 a month for 4 months." Well, I could do that. And I had this car. It had no air conditioning, and that'll make you pray a lot in Las Vegas in the summer. It had electric windows. They were all broken in different positions. The driver's door was tied shut because it wouldn't latch. So it had rope around it, tying it shut. It had aluminum foil over one of the headlights because one of the headlights was burnt out, so you had to have the high beams on. And then that annoys people, so you have to put aluminum foil over one of the headlights so they don't know that it's the high beams. And I would fill, and the liner, there's a liner on the roof, it was torn down. You'd have to push it up to look in the rear view mirror, right? And I'd fill that car. I'd go to that Samaritan house and the Reality House. I'd go to those places. I'd fill that car up with new guys. And I'd go to meetings. Sometimes we'd go to 2 in the night. And it was some of the most glorious, freeing time in my life. And I had nothing. Years ago, I bought this crazy car, this stupid purchase, but it was fun. Bought one of those 12-cylinder bi-turbo AMG Mercedes, you know. And things weren't going my way for a period during when I had that car. And I remembered driving the old beat-up car, feeling really, really happy. And I'm driving this Mercedes, and I'm not so happy, right? Because happiness has nothing to do with the material world. It has to do with the spiritual world, the realm of the spirit our book refers to. And so I filled my life up with this stuff. You know, eventually if you start sponsoring people, it changes you. There's a funny dynamic in the realm of the spirit is you will get what you give to others. You want to be happy? Devote your life to making other people happy. You want to be free? Help people to get free. You want to be connected to Alcoholics Anonymous? Help other people get connected. There was a brilliant old timer when I was brand new. I wasn't even out of detox, been about a week, and I was going to this old Alano club. That's the only place I felt comfortable out in AA meetings. Because it was real Skid Row. It was spiritually nestled between a topless, bottomless strip joint and a pawn shop. And it really was. It was right between those two places. And it was one of those meetings with down and out people. Not unusual to have someone fall out of their chair during the meeting and have a seizure on the floor. And it was back in the day where that happened so often, they didn't even stop the meeting. You know, somebody would try to stick something in the guy's mouth so he didn't bite his tongue, and they just keep sharing. Just keep on sharing. Just Joey's detoxing. You know, do that now, they'll bring an ambulance, the whole meeting stops, and oh my God. I felt comfortable there. In the nicer meetings, like there was a suburban club in town, oh God, I'd go there, I'd feel dirty kind of. But I felt good at that Alano club. And I'm there a week out of detox, I guess, and an old timer comes up to me. And I didn't feel like I fit there, but I fit there better than the other places. And he comes up to me and he says, I need your help. I said, yeah. I just felt really good that the guy was talking to me. And I said, what do you need? He said, you're brand new. I said, yeah, I'm only a week out of the detox. And he said, well, we need you. He said, we get a lot of newcomers here. And, me and some of the guys that are sober a number of years here, we try to reach out to them. We try to help them. But most of us have lost touch with what it feels like to be new. He said, we need somebody like you that knows what it feels like to be new, to go up to those guys and let them know that someone here knows what's going on with them and make them feel welcome. And I remember thinking, yeah, I can do that. I'm not going to teach them the steps. I can't sponsor. I don't have anything really of any concrete inside of me, but I can do that. I can do what he said. And so I made it my job. I do go to that meeting almost every day, and I'd look for the new guys, and when I'd see one, I'd go up to them and I'd try to make them feel welcome and just tell them, it's awkward coming here, isn't it? I tell you, I came here, it felt like everybody I knew everybody forever, and then there was me, and I'd share that stuff with them, and yeah. And looking back, truthfully, I don't know if I ever made any of those people feel welcome in AA or feel like they fit, except me. In no time at all, that became my place. I felt a connection there to that group because I was being useful there. And it's the beginning. Service and 12-step work are the beginnings of a love affair with Alcoholics Anonymous. I think there's a spiritual principle that you will fall in love with anything that you serve, and you'll continue to be in love with anything you continue to serve. And I started to fall in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. And sponsoring people has been, I was only sober. I don't even think it was 3 months, maybe, I don't know. It wasn't very long. And a guy asked me to sponsor him, and I turned him down. It was one of the few times I ever saw my sponsor get mad at me. And he was hot. He said, how dare you? And I went back and tried to tell him, I'm sorry, I'll sponsor you. It was too late. He moved on. I don't know what happened to him, but I've never seen him in Alcoholics Anonymous. I think it must have been very difficult for him to muster the courage to ask me. When I turned him down, it's unfortunate. But I never turned anybody down after that. And I started sponsoring people. And I run into guys intermittently sober 20, 30, 40 years, and they're depressed. First question I ask them, and we always explore, we want to go back through the steps to see where they leak. Right? But I always ask them certain questions, about home group, commitments. And I always get around to this question. So, tell me, how many new guys are you sponsoring? You'd be surprised how often someone sober 30, 40 years who's depressed will say, well, I'm not sponsoring anybody. And I've heard one of two things. One is, well, I used to sponsor guys, and they're all doing well, but nobody calls me anymore, and or even more frightening, I've had a couple guys say this to me, well, I don't sponsor people, it's not my niche. Really? Wow, this is Alcoholics Anonymous. This is an altruistic program, and the primary purpose of it is to help other alcoholics. So it's not your niche. What program are you in, Al-Anon? I mean, I don't say that, but that's what we do here. We help other drunks. And so I said, why do you think it's not your niche? Well, I'd sponsored a couple guys, and they drank again, so I'm not going to do that anymore. It's too painful. Well, yeah, I get that. I had one of the Earlier guys I sponsored committed suicide. But I knew I had to keep doing this. And it's a work in progress. There's a guy in California, Bill says, if you're afraid of killing somebody, he said, you got to kill a couple of them to get good at it. That's not true. That's not really true. But I don't have the power to save you, and I don't have the power to kill you either. But what I do have is the willingness to show up and let's see what happens. Let's see if God will maybe work through me to help you. Because that's how God works through people. It becomes evident over and over and over again that God works through people. And so we show up. So they say, it's not, because I sponsored 3 people and they all drank in, so it's not my niche. And I have to tell them, I said, listen, Bill Wilson worked with 96 failures before he met Dr. Bob, and he persisted and he honed his ability to help people until when him and Bob got together, it changed the world. The world's never been the same, especially for alcoholics and families of alcoholics. And millions of us have had our lives turned around as a result of Bill Wilson's persistence. And I'm here today because of that. And I suspect you are too. And so I said, listen, here's what I want you to do. You can sponsor people. You got to put those old ideas out of your head. That it's your job to make sure they don't drink. It's not your job. You go down that road too long, you'll end up a whimpering newcomer in Al-Anon. That's not your job. Your job is to carry the message. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to find a fishing hole. And what I mean by that is I want you to find a place where there's a lot of new people potentially without sponsors gather. Detoxes are good. Recovery houses are good. Sober livings are good. Maybe you got a newcomer meeting at one of the clubs where you live. Find the place that's a good fishing hole. I go to Detox for the same reason that Willie Sutton said he robbed banks. He said, because that's where the money is. And I go to places like that, and I always go to places like that because I'm looking. I'm fishing. I'm fishing not because they're alcoholics. I'm fishing because I am. And I need that in my life. My well-being. Wilson talked about, one of the things he talked about in his story that really got to me, he talked about the times that he was afraid he was going to drink again because he'd be overcome with depression, self-pity, resentment, all that crap that some of us face when we're sober a little while. And he said he would go down to Towns Hospital and he'd spend a couple hours down there talking to some new guy that's throwing his guts out. And he said he'd be miraculously uplifted and set on his feet. He called it a design for living that works in tough going. I've been through a lot of stuff in sobriety. A couple divorces, a couple financial setbacks, success, which I think is more dangerous for a guy like me than failure. And it's the consistency of helping others and sponsoring people that has been God's vehicle to keep me out of myself. Because I'm one of those guys, you leave me alone, I don't do this stuff, I just get me right on me. And that's not good for me. So you find this fishing hole. Maybe there's a meeting there every day. Get there a half hour. Get there before everybody else. Get there before the patients are in the meeting hall yet. Wait for them. As they come in, shake their hands, introduce themselves. Try to chat them up a little bit. Look for a guy who looks lost. The kind of lost you felt when you were new. Look for that guy and have a conversation. Just chat him up a little bit. Tell him a little bit about you. And then get around to the question, get around to the statement that how important sponsorship has been for you. How that very few of us can do this thing alone. It's very few of us, it's just us in the book can do this. Because there's all these areas in our life that we need help with. And then Ask him, do you have a sponsor? And if he says no, just say, listen, I'm not trying to sell nothing here. I don't want to impose myself on you, but here's my phone number. If you want to have a sponsor or willing to be sponsored, it would be my privilege because people helped me and I have a debt here. I would be honored to sponsor you. And I'll tell you, you do that 10 times, probably 4 or 5 out of those 10 times, when you say that to a person, you'll watch their face change because they have been fighting the battle inside themselves to ask someone. And they're so afraid of rejection, they can't. They can't bring themselves to ask someone, and you just solve their problem for them. And they'll light up, they'll go, oh yeah, I'd love to have you sponsor me. And if you did that a couple times a week, at the end of a year, you'll find yourself in a coffee shop somewhere in a booth full of people you work with. The big promise in the big book is that God will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. And it doesn't occur by breaking into the adult table. It occurs by bringing up the new guys. We create a fellowship. Marnie, I've watched Marnie for 2 years. My God, she's such a... She goes to a meeting, my home group. I get caught up easy. I sponsor a lot of guys there, so I get caught up talking to them. My friends and stuff. Not Marnie. Marnie is like an arrow shot out of a bow to any new girl in the room. She has never seen this girl before. And God has showed her how to create a fellowship she craved. She sponsors a lot of people. I wish I was as good at it as she is. I have the intention to be as good at it as, but I walk into the meeting and there's guys I got to talk to you and you can talk to me later. I keep forgetting why we're there. I'm not there to be with my buddies and my sponsees. I'm there to look for guys to help. I'm there to live my primary purpose. And Wilson called it the primary purpose because it's above everything. It's above everything here. Now, most of us get sober and we already have a primary purpose. I think every person I've ever known that comes here has a primary purpose. And the primary purpose is me. And my feelings and my finances and my emotions and my relief and me. And Alcoholics Anonymous is asking me to do something dramatic, is to push that aside. Bill says, he said, a price had to be paid. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. Well, my experience, you can't destroy it, but you can keep pushing it away. You keep sweeping it away by taking and filling those moments with altruistic actions. And so we help people here. When Jack Alexander went to investigate Alcoholics Anonymous in the early 40s, he went to check us out, secretly thinking that we're some kind of scam or something. You know, we're too good to be true. Alcoholics helping alcoholics for free. Somebody's making money here. And he went to Alcoholics Anonymous and he explored us and looked at what we do and who we are. And it blew his mind. We were exactly what we said we were. We were an altruistic movement. No one's making money here. No one's grandizing themselves here. No one's promoting themselves here. And yet, it's a sadness in my life that sometimes the Alcoholics Anonymous of today at times would make Jack Alexander's fears come true. There's people that are recovery coaches now that are making 7 figures on helping people, that are promoting books in AA, it's become a me. It's become sometimes a fellowship, I think, that's embedded with a lot of narcissism and self-serving and self-seeking. But it never was intended to be like that. It's when they say in the book it's an altruistic movement, truly, it is. And so the guys I sponsor, we try to stay true to form, to what our purpose is here, of self-forgetting and service. When I said the third step prayer, and I said to God, I said, I offer myself to you, for you to build with me and do with me as you will. What I'm really saying is I don't get an opinion about my own life anymore. It's none of my business. Well, I can't do that. How can you take a mind that just keeps focusing on me and have it just like try to say to yourself, well, okay, I'm not going to think about me ever again. It doesn't work. So I'm asking God to relieve me of this bondage of self, because it's my only hope to better do his will. And then if he'll do that, if he'll take away the difficulties that with self that we're going to inventory for the rest of our lives, with selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear, if he takes away the difficulties with self, for one reason, God, one reason only, so that victory over them would bear witness to those I would help. Of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life might do thy will always. That Alcoholics Anonymous never was a self-help program. It was never intended to be that. It's a program of self-abandonment and service. It's a program of, look what happened when I was obsessively self-concerned. I ended up on a bridge in 1978 trying to take my own life. Do I understand that? What happens to me when I run my life? Do I get that? And if I get that, then self-abandonment and service is a novel idea. And so that's what you taught me here. My first sponsor was a tremendous example of Alcoholics Anonymous. My second sponsor was, and my current sponsor, who I've only had for a little over a year and a half since Clancy died, is a great servant in Alcoholics Anonymous. The people that I look up to are the people that live the principles of the traditions and examples of the steps, and they live this self-forgetting life and they help others. Those are my heroes here. Those are the people I try to emulate. And those are the kind of people I run with. I don't sponsor, I sponsor sponsors. The only time I'm going to abandon a guy is if he refuses to help anybody. Because without the 12th step, this is just another self-seeking program. It's just another endeavor back into me. But the accumulation of everything we do in the 12 steps and the 12 traditions is so that we can become better servants. I need to serve. I just got a copy. I hadn't read it since I was in high school of Milton's Paradise Lost. I started looking at it, and oh my God, it's difficult. It's a difficult read. And the reason I got it is I remembered from high school, there was a line in there where Lucifer was being cast out of heaven, and he shook his fist at God and the angels in heaven. He says, I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. And if you're reigning, it feels like hell. And if you're serving, it feels like heaven. Because there's only one freedom, and it contains all freedoms, and that's freedom from the bondage of self. Without that, nothing really means anything. I'll tell you this quick little story, and then I'll end. I was up in Central Coast of California many years ago with a sponsee I had who took meetings into one of the maximum security penitentiaries up there in Morro Bay. And I went with Chuck I was to give a talk up there. So we went there, drove up. It took a while to get there. Went through all the security and got into the meeting, and it was an electric meeting. It was almost like being in my home group. that spirit that's in the room was there. It's God expressing himself through the consciousness of a group of people who want recovery and help others first. It was amazing. And this is one of those prisons where a lot of lifers, a lot of people, there's guys in there doing 2-3 life sentences, never get out, never see the light of day. And Chuck, my sponsee at the time, was pointing out, that guy back there on the back wall, he's got 2 life sentences, he'll never get out. And I looked and he's with some guy, and he's going through the book and they're laughing. And he said, oh yeah, that's a new fish. He said, this group, they do their own corrections work. They take meetings into the fish tank where they bring the new people before they let them on the yard, and they read them the doctor's opinion, and they have sponsors before they get in Gen Pop. They already have a sponsor. And I'm looking around the room, and there's guys in there that are freer, and they're laughing, and they have the joy of living within them, and they'll never get out of prison. Never. But they have the freedom from the bondage of self. And they have it the same way I get it. I don't get it with a fancy car. I don't get it with a big house. I don't get it with a beautiful wife. I get it by getting me up off of me by helping you. And it is the greatest of freedoms. Without it, that same week, it's so funny. We have a club in Vegas called the Green Valley Club. It's in the middle of like suburban area. So it's not unusual to see a lot of Porsches and Mercedes and BMWs in the parking lot. Not unusual. And I go there sometimes. I don't go too much anymore. I go there to meetings, and it's one of those whiny AA groups. You know what I mean? You've been to meetings like that. Starts out, does anybody have a problem? Yeah, my maid quit. Oh, poor thing. Just narcissistic stuff. And I remember thinking, as I left that prison that night, that the people in this prison are freer than those people in those fancy cars in that suburban AA meeting. Because those people in prison found something that these people are too self-involved to find and too selfish to take the actions against. And that's the freedom from the bondage of self. Thanks for listening.
For it is by forgetting that one finds